hello, good afternoon. I think three of you that are on know me. My name's Paul. I am a professional photographer. I specialise in food, and I've been teaching photography now in adult education and other avenues for about 10 and a bit years. So what I thought I would do would give you a little bit of a rundown of ISO. I did a live complete test just to have a go with it and see what happens live the other week, last week actually, on aperture and shutter, and rattle through it. So I'm a little bit more structured and we can have fun with this. So basically ISO, let's show you my screen so you can see what we are talking about. So ISO. What is ISO? ISO basically it's a setting that controls your camera's sensitivity to light. Okay, so it's kind of the building blocks of every exposure and every it's the building blocks of the exposure. It tells your camera how much light is there, so it basically means that you can the camera has more of an idea when it's doing settings as to how much light is available, so therefore will this be overexposed, will that be overexposed if you choose this setting, that setting. ISO settings, I can't see the screen through this is great. So the ISO settings give your camera a reference basically of how much light levels you're working with, and then this is kind of a base for how it sets all exposures. So if you're using the camera in automatic, the whole point of this is to get you off that little green square and to get you using the camera in programs for the P mode, shutter priority, TV for a Canon user, or S if you're not a Canon user, aperture value, aperture priority, AV for Canon, A if you're not a Canon user, and M which is manual eventually. So what the whole point of this is, ISO is that baseline, it's the base bit that everything then works off of. Yeah. So the camera, if you tell the camera using ISO X, it will then take that and use that to build its exposure for everything else you're trying to achieve, everything else you're taking. So it will know how much light is available based on you using ISO 100, for example. Do you remember this stuff? Do we? Film, yeah. Used to buy it in the shop and take it out and put it in the back of your camera and close it back and yeah. Then you had to take it, get it processed, wait a little while, and then you get it back with some bits of paper called prints. So people remember those prints, hard copy things, not looking on the screen. So film is kind of where the ISO has come from. ISO, by the way, the abbreviation is Industry Standard Organization. Used to be ASA, the American Standards Association, but it's now Industry Standard Association. Whatever acronym you use, it basically means sensitivity to light. So if you were going on holiday with your film camera back 20, 30 years ago and you wanted some film, you would go into a shop and say, "Hello, Mr. Shopkeeper, Mrs. Shopkeeper, keep it PC. I'm going on holiday. I'd like some film for my camera, please." And they would say, "Hello, sir/madam. Thank you for visiting our shop and not going online. Where are you going and what do you intend to take photographs of?" So you would potentially say, "Well, I'm going to Africa on safari. You'll be taking pictures during the day." And they go, so you're going to be in very bright light situations. So I recommend either ISO 100 or 200 because that is that ISO. That ISO film needs a lot of light to be exposed correctly, so that's fine, great. So you go off on holiday, you take your pictures with your 12 rolls of ISO 100 or 200, you come back, you have them processed, they're great. 6 months later, you go into the same shop, you say, "Hello, Mr. Shopkeeper, Mrs. Shopkeeper, hello, sir/madam, how was your holiday and your safari in Africa?" "Great, thank you for asking, blah, blah, blah. I'm now going on holiday, it's November, I'm going to a wedding in Wales, the end of November, you're taking pictures indoors, it's going to be dark. Right, in that case, I recommend you use ISO 400 or 800 because you need less light to expose it." Boom. So film was set in, as you can see on my little screen here. Can you all see my presentation okay? I'm just making sure that you can see the presentation I have, can you let me know in the comments, please? Just make sure you can see my pictures of film. But yeah, so what you've got here is different rolls of film. So there's Kodak, there's Fuji, and funnily enough, there's the ISO 100, ISO 200, ISO 400, and ISO 800. And they were really the speeds and sensitivities, thanks Kate, sensitivities of film back in the day. You know, in kind of like the 90s and the early noughties, you could quite easily get anything from 100 right way through to 800 or 1600. But now our cameras are different. And unlike film, with film, you put a roll of film into a camera and you were limited to either 24 or 36 nearly, shots, that was close, of that one ISO setting, you know, that one sensitivity. So if you were taking pictures outdoors in the sunshine in the afternoon, and then you went indoors later to take pictures with the same camera, same film, you'd find it would be more difficult to take the images because the film needed more light to expose to get a decent exposure. Cool, thanks, Fran. Excellent. So yeah, film was always basically it's a one-shot wonder. You buy ISO 200, you buy ISO 400. When I used to shoot weddings on film, I used to rock around with two camera bodies. And I'd have, 400 in one camera and 100 in the other. So, yeah, I knew if I was inside, outside, if the light changed, I could just literally really quickly just switch camera bodies and bang, done. Cool. Blank screen. Da, 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 da. So let's come out of that and let's come back to me, because I want to talk to you. Hello. So, look at the screen, look at the camera, look at the screen, look at the camera. So, ISO. The thing about ISO is, now you can set your ISO per shot, okay? And that's really important because not every photograph you take, one after the other, it's going to have the same lighting. We know what the Great British weather's like. At the moment, it's absolutely stunning, but the sun can come in, it can go out, the sun can go behind clouds, we can lose it. It can go from bright sunshine to pouring rain, like that. So the beauty of your DSLRs and your mirrorless cameras is that you can, in your manual mode, not in the automatic mode, in the manual mode, so your program, your shutter priority, aperture priority, and manual, you can change your ISO value shot on shot. Great, huh? Really useful. Really useful. Why do you need to change your ISO values? Why would you want to do that? Well, let's go back into my little prayers because I want to show you. Oh, we've got 7 people on. Hello. So let's just share that screen. So what we have here, hoping you can see this. So the ISO it's the cornerstone. It's that base layer. It's where everything starts from. It's that foundation that your exposure. The exposure is the action of you pressing the shutter button on your camera to take a photograph. The shutter inside the camera opens and closes and exposes the light, the camera sensor, the film plane, the camera sensor to light. So an exposure is you pressing the button, shutter opening, closing, light hitting sensor, image created. It's a bit more complicated now, but you get the general gist. ISO is the prime suspect on this. What it does, your ISO is where the camera takes its lead from, and once you've set the ISO, the camera goes, great, I can do this, this, and this. So from ISO, you then have the aperture. So this is kind of like your second step, and the aperture controls the amount of light entering the camera body through your lens, because I'm going to do a session on aperture and shutter in depth, on aperture and shutter as a refresher, or for those who don't necessarily, understand it and want to learn it. So the aperture is a hole inside the lens which opens and closes to let light in. The wider it is, the more light comes through, the smaller it is, the less light comes through. Physics, yeah? But the aperture controls the amount of light entering into the camera body. You then have this thing called the shutter, which sits... So here's your camera, here's your lens, and the shutter sits kind of here. just where your release button is in the ground along that plane there. And that opens and closes when you press the shutter button to allow light in. Now what that does, it opens and closes at different speeds to allow you to get to see more movement and less movement in your image. So the aperture lets the light into the camera body, the shutter then lets it through to the image sensor. Yeah? So ISO is number 1 of the process, number 2 is the light coming through the aperture, through the lens, and number 3 is the shutter. And we call this little thing the exposure triangle. And you look at exposure triangles online, etc., etc. The shutter might be on the left and the aperture might be on the right, but one thing that is consistent throughout any exposure triangle that anybody publishes or talks about, ISO is at the base, because ISO is where it all comes from. If the camera doesn't know how much light it's dealing with in the scene you're photographing, how can it work out whether you've got the right aperture setting? How can it work out whether you've got the correct shutter? Yeah, shutter speed going on to left. So ISO tells the camera how much light is out there, and this is so key, really key in your photography. So, those who don't know where it is, these are Canon cameras, but somewhere on your camera, either on the top of it or the back of it, you will have a little ISO button looking something like that, a little red circle around it. And you press that down, and in front of your, how clear this is, but you have a little wheel here that you can then move. So you press your ISO button down and you wheel it to change your ISO value. And you can see on the second image that you've got, you might have the button on the back of the camera. You can also access your ISO settings within the main menu of your camera. Depending on your brand and your model, it's in different places. So if you're having trouble finding it, RTM. Yeah. If you haven't got a hard copy of your manual, go onto the manufacturer's website, go into their downloads and support pages, and you will be able to find a PDF of several hundred pages of your manual. Okay, so, but generally there's a button on top of the camera or the back of the camera, and you can always access it via the main menu. Some of you have got these really posh smart cameras which have touch screens which allow you to access your menu that way. It will be in there, yeah, and it will always have ISO, those 3 letters. So, this is your fairly typical ISO menu display. Okay, this is again it's off a Canon camera. It's the clearest I could find. So, notice you have auto. I'll touch on that in a second. 100, 200, 400, 800, 1600, 3200, 64, and H. When you start shooting in, so the 1, 2, 400, 800, 16, 32 and 6400, they're all generally, and some of your cameras will have higher ISO values available, some of them will have lower ISO values available. It depends on the make and the model, the age of the camera, the cost of the camera. My 5D Mark IV that I'm filming on right now will go up to 25,600 as its highest ISO. And then we have what we call H. Now H is higher, and that's normally a stop more. So if we multiply 25,600 by 2, which I'm not going to try and do because my maths is rubbish, that would then be your next up. But that is only usable generally in the RAW setting of your camera. In these little chats, I will be talking about things like aperture and shutter, and I will touch on RAW in a couple of weeks, maybe 3-4 weeks if people want to do it. It's a bit. You need a computer for it, but I will touch on RAW and how it works and how to edit it. But if you have L and H on your ISO settings and your ISO values, those are lower ISO values, which need more light to expose them, and higher ISO values for use in lower light that you can access only if you set in the RAW functionality of your camera. Excuse me. Feel free to ping questions up in the comments if you have any questions. It's all good. So, 100, 200, 400, 800, 1600, 3200, 6400. What does it mean? Yeah? It means a blank screen. So ISO values affect your images. Okay? So we have a little list here. I've gone 100, 200. I can't see because my zoom menu is all over it. So you've got 100, 200, 400, 800. 100, 200, 400 are in green. Okay, 800, 1600, 32 and 6400 are all in red. Why is that? The green values, the 100, 200, 400, are low ISO values. They're low numbers, so they're low ISO values, which means it needs a decent amount of available light in order to expose your image. Okay, so no good sticking your camera to ISO 100, going out and going to a party and try and take photographs indoors without flash at ISO 100 in a dark area. Maybe you've got, not going to happen right now, but maybe in the future. We will all celebrate our freedom. You can then, if you're at a party, very low light, disco kind of thing going on, ISO 100 is going to give you very, very, very low shutter speeds because it's expecting lots of light to be available. So in dark conditions, you're going to find shutter speeds of seconds. But shutter speeds and apertures, as I said, next couple of weeks I'm going to cover those in detail. But you just need to be aware, if you choose a low ISO value, you're going to need a lot of available light in order to capture it, in order to capture the image shake-free. So for example, so it's high image clarity and low image noise. Okay, when I say clarity, a low ISO value, 100, 200, 400, even if you go to 50, like some of the Canon cameras can in RAW, basically pin sharp. Yeah, there's very little noise, or what we used to call grain with film. So digital noise, camera noise, is created when basically there's not enough light hitting the sensor, or the camera's struggling to get enough light into the sensor to illuminate the pixels. Because your sensor is made of millions and millions and millions of pixels. 20 million pixels, 25 million pixels, something like that. So there are cameras that have 100 million pixels. So if there's not much available light, the camera is going to struggle to get light to the pixels. And what happens there, if it's a bit dark, then, your pixels and your image, the pixels basically enlarge. And what you find is it looks grainy and muzzy and dirty and mucky. But I've got some examples of that in a bit to show you. We then go to our other side here, high ISO values. So your 800, your 1600, your 3200, your 6400, and, because some of you are going to have higher values than that available in your camera. What you will see with this is, 800, 1600. A lot of people will use this if it's not particularly bright outside, but it's daylight, and they want to capture fast action. I don't know if you go to a wildlife park, or you go to a sporting event, or kids are tracing around in the garden, whatever, and you want to capture that, you need a higher ISO in theory, in lower light conditions, to freeze motion. But again, shutter in a couple of weeks, we'll get there. So I say with these, especially at the 3200 and the 6400 ISO and above end, you're going to get a lesser image quality. Because again, what is actually happening is, in bright conditions, if you're in bright conditions, like it is today outside, I've got a bit of sun on me here, it's fine, you will find that your pixels will show up at a higher ISO, will show up more. So it's the opposite, it's like the other way around. With low ISOs in dark conditions, the sensor shows the grain. Well, in this situation, there's too much light hitting there. It's too bright, and what you will see is you'll start to see again these grains, these bits of, the whole pixelation coming through, and things look muzzy and dirty, and whites tend to look a little yellowy brown and a little bit grainy and dotty. So that is, sorry, I'm losing my plot. So I went out for a little walk this morning as part of the government guidance. Have your exercise, but stay 2 minutes apart from everybody. I've had my exercise for the day. I had a walk up to the common around the corner from me, and I made some friends. These guys just loved me, and they were making life really easy to photograph. So all of these 3 shots I'm going to show you were shot at f/22. Okay, so my aperture, I've shot in aperture priority. Okay, so in aperture priority, you tell the camera what aperture you want, and the camera will do everything else for you. Okay, so it will, if your ISO is set to automatic ISO, it will choose your ISO for you. So this is something I've missed, apologies. So auto ISO, basically, the camera makes a decision. You press the shutter button halfway down and think, do you know what, stick it on auto ISO, and as you press the shutter button halfway down, the camera will go, right, there's this much light around, I'm going to do this. and you have zero control over what ISO value is actually used. Which is okay, but sometimes the camera's not that clever. You know, you're kind of not quite bright, not quite dark, and it gives you an ISO of 6400, and everything's muzzy and dirty, and the sky doesn't look anywhere near as pink and beautiful and clear as you thought it did. So yeah, auto ISO, it works, but this is the whole thing, encouraging you to move to the manual side of things. Set your ISO manually. Tell the camera what it's got to work with. I have a friend who consistently, I say to them, shows me a picture. Oh yeah, what ISO is set to? Oh, it's an auto. Try this. You know who you are. So yeah, set your ISO manually. So that's what I've done here. Aperture priority. I've set the aperture at f22 because I want as much detail in the frame on the point of from the point of focus, which are the horses, front to back. So, horses are my point of focus. They're giving each other a bit of a clean lick. It's gorgeous. They just stood there for me, which is lovely. So f22, I've set the ISO to 100. And the camera said, okay, at ISO 100, and you've asked for f22, I'll give you 1/13 of a second as the shutter speed. Shutter speeds, we're going to go into this in more detail in a couple of weeks, but shutter speeds are expressed in fractions of seconds. And a 13th of a second will open and close the shutter a lot slower than, for example, 500th of a second. So any movement in the shot, and you can see here the horse's tail is swishing, and you can see movement on the end of the tail. So yeah, that's what I've done. 13th of a second, ISO 100. Great. So I've maintained my aperture of f22, and I've gone up to ISO 800. And that shutter speed's increased dramatically. Because what I'm doing, from ISO 100, which is a low value, I've gone in stops, so increments, movements, full numbers. 100 ISO, 200 ISO, 400 ISO, 800. So I've gone 1, 2, 3 stops up. And I've given myself 3 times as much light. Because the ISO, by increasing your ISO, you're telling the camera, hey, you've got more light to play with. Yeah, so you're cheating the camera and telling it, by going to a higher ISO value, there's more light there. So the camera goes, great, you're still at f22, I'm at ISO 800, I can go to 100 to 125th per second. Great, you'll freeze motion, you'll do this, you'll do that. Fantastic. But there's a trade-off. It's not particularly clear on the screen here, and these images will be available as PDF. I've got them as PDFs, and I'll post them in the comments, or I'll find some way. I can't remember how to do it, but I'll find some way of doing it so you can access these. Or drop me a message, a direct message, and I will send you the files, PDFs. I've done a whole series of these. I've done from 100, 200, 400, 800, blah, 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 so you can see the difference. As you increase your ISO in daylight, in bright conditions like this, you start to get, not image degradation, but you start to see the noise and the grain coming through, so the clarity's not quite there. So if you were to compare this ISO 800 shot back to the 100, the quality of the sky, no, that's the wrong way, Paul. The quality of the sky is much better in the 100 ISO rather than the 800 ISO, because there's just more detail. You're not pumping more light effectively into the camera. So we then go to ISO 6400. Now, if you have a look at this PDFs, have a look at this on your screen, or put your nose up to the screen, whatever you're looking at. On the shadow of the horses, you will start to see noise appearing. There's more noise in the sky. Yeah, you'll start to see it. Daylight, it's sometimes, unless you've ramped the ISO right the way up to the top max, 6400, 12,800, 25,600, whatever your camera goes to, unless you ramp it right the way up there to get really fast shutter speeds in bright conditions, you're not going to see a huge amount of detail. A huge amount of difference, sorry. Where you do see the difference, it's when you start shooting at night. So I went out last night about 10:30, pointed my camera up to the sky on a tripod, and shot at f2.8. I set my camera, so I thought I'm going to go f2.8 because I want to. There's not a huge amount of detail. You're going to see the sky nicely. To be honest with you, it was just where I happened to be. Set the ISO at ISO 100. I set the ISO at ISO 100 because I know if I'm pointing my camera at something in the dark, by going to my lowest ISO possible, I'm going to get the clearest, highest quality looking image. Not the sharpest, that's down to your focus and your shutter speed. But I'm going to get the best looking image. I'm not going to see so much noise. So I've done that, and the camera said, okay, you want f2.8, you give me ISO 100, I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Obviously this is tripod mounted. I've got a steady hand, but I'm not that steady. And then I went along, and I went to ISO 800, still at f2.8. Now what's interesting is that I've actually dropped my exposure time from 30 seconds to 4 seconds here, because the ISO 800 is saying to the camera, hey, there's more light, great, you can have a faster shutter speed. So from 30 seconds to 4 seconds, 4 seconds is a shorter exposure time, so it's a faster shutter speed effectively. But what is worth looking at as we siphon through these, I'll show you in a second, but where the highlight is, where the bright bits in the image are, you will find that you start to get, in low light, noise. And it's so obvious it's not true. So we'll siphon through that, and I'll get you to look at a specific point in the image in a moment. So ISO 800, still f2.8, 4 seconds, great. Let's ramp it up a bit more. So I've then gone to 6400, and you should be able to see, without even me pointing it out, that kind of bottom section between the two houses. You've got that lovely kind of orangey, purpley sky coming through. You can see dots. You can see little bits going pop, pop, pop. And that's your noise. That's your grain, as we used to call it working with film. That's your noise coming through. And you know what? It's not too bad. But this is why I would always use a low ISO value in dark conditions. So, ISO 6400, we're still at f2.8. The camera's gone, great, f2.8, you'll give me ISO 6400. Fantastic, I can give you half a second. Wow. So that's like so much quicker, but we're sacrificing quality. So just keep your eyes on that little orangey yellowy portion of the shot, just underneath that very bright star light. Not quite sure what it is. It might be a plane. Between the two houses, I'm just going to go back. So look at ISO 100. Keep looking at that point between the two houses where it's kind of orangey yellow going to really nice light purple. 100. Oh, to 800. Yes, we'll go backwards because it won't do the rotation. So 1600. Look at that little bit between the houses. 800. 100. Clarity, yeah? Much more clarity on the 100. 64. 800, 100. Smoother, crisper, cleaner, much, much nicer. So you're thinking, okay, Paul, that's great. Fantastic, thanks for that. You've taught me a bit about ISO, but why would I take it off of auto? Do you know what? For me, it just makes more sense to take it off of auto. Let's take you back to my camera so you can see me. Hello, I'm back. So auto ISO is basically, well, it's an automatic function, and I'm trying to help you guys to get away from the auto functions and control your camera. By having complete and total control of your camera, you are going to improve your image quality. You are going to, be more in control. You're going to have more creativity. I generally, when I'm photographing food, I don't generally take my ISO any higher than about 400 if I can absolutely avoid it, because I want clarity. Yeah. If I'm using artificial light, studio flash, I don't want it any higher than ISO 100 because otherwise things will be really bright, far too bleached out. So everything looks really white and horrible. But there are times where you have to, to achieve a certain shutter speed. So your ISO is there as your base level. Mr. Marshall, good afternoon. Better late than never. No, it's about using the ISO as your base level, using it as your starting point, which your camera always will. And if you control that, you tell it, I want to use ISO 100 because I'm going to go and take a landscape. I want to use ISO 800 because I'm in the back garden with kids and it's starting to get a bit dark, but they're running around like lunatics. Yeah, make your decision and then work with it. You stick the camera into auto ISO, you might be taking a photograph like I was, the examples I've given you a second ago. I might be taking photographs of the sky, I might be doing some astrophotography. I don't want ISO 6400. Yeah, it'll give me a really fast shutter speed, but I don't want that. I want to capture all of that motion, all of the movement in the sky, all that beautiful available light, as long as you haven't got huge amounts of light pollution. So make your choice and stick to it. Yeah, you've decided I'm gonna learn to use my camera manually. Well, start with the basics. Yeah, start using ISO. ISO is where the camera starts, by knowing how much light is available. Boom, I'm here. Right, you're going to set an aperture of f2.8, knowing ISO 100, aperture of f2.8, I can give you a shutter speed of 125th a second. So by learning this and by getting your head around it and playing with it, it's a really good way to start. Have we got any questions? Do you know what, it's a bit of a quick one today, 30-ish minutes. Are there any questions regarding ISO? Speaking over everybody pieces. Check them in the comments on the bottom in the Facebook comments. I can see 5 comments. I can see Kitty twice, Fran twice, and Mr. Marshall once. Okay, so yeah, ISO worth playing with actually, especially if we've got a bit of time to ourselves. And you can do this. You don't need to go out. You don't need to break the lockdown. You can do this very easily. You can stick your camera out your window, stick the camera in the garden, point it at something, set your camera into aperture priority, and you can then choose a mid-point aperture, f5.6, f8, something like that. Set your ISO 100. Press click. Change your ISO to thanks, Mark. Set your ISO to thank you, Adrian. Set your ISO, I'm going to get on with it now. Set your ISO to 100. You set, I don't know, f5.6, f8. Set your ISO to 100. Press the button. Now change your ISO up to ISO 200. Take your picture. Change your ISO then to 400, to 800, to 1600, to 6400. However high your camera will go. Look at these images on your screen, not on the camera screen because it's quite tiny. Looking at 3.5-inch screen, it's not the easiest to see. But use your computer, whatever. Have a look, and you will see. If you can zoom in, you will see how the ISO is affecting your image quality. What you also be able to see on the back of your camera is when you play these back on the back of your camera. If you press your info button or your display button, depending on your brand, on your model of camera, it will show you the settings. It will show you f5.6 at 125th of a second at ISO 100. And then as you flick through, you'll see you go to ISO 200, you'll see that your shutter speed at which the shutter is opening and closing to let light in, will get faster because by upping your ISO, you're giving it more light. So have a play with that. Keep it consistent. Camera on a tripod. You can do it in a poorly lit room, outside, and then try and do it at night. Yeah, literally back in the garden, camera on a tripod, or rested sturdy and safe. Yeah, so it's not moving too much. Set an aperture. Change your ISO from 100 to 200, then to 400, and take your picture at each increment and look back at them, and you will see a difference. I should be able to post these the PDF in my Facebook page. I think I'm not quite sure. I'll check on that. But if you want the PDFs, drop me a DM, and I will send them to you with pleasure. Why did Fran? Thank you. Question: why did you suggest 2.8 for the night sky? Okay, because A, I wanted to, and B, I knew that if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to have demonstrated what I was trying to demonstrate, basically. So where I was, if I'd have gone to f5.6 or f8 out night sky, that then is limiting the amount of light coming through my lens. At f2.8, I was already at 30 seconds, so I needed to give myself a bit of room to move. Yeah, so that's why I did that. I was cheating a little bit. I knew what was going to happen. So yeah, have a play. It's a bit of a cop-out, to be honest, Fran, but sorry. Mr. Marshall, I have been caught out a number of times by ISO being in auto, and the camera uses, yes, 12,800. The knock-on effect is incredibly dirty shadow detail. Good word, Paul, thank you. It's now one of the few things I work through, especially when doing Astro. Yeah, it's... using auto ISO it's easy and it's simple, but when you get bitten like this, like Paul's just said, he's travelled a lot and he's been to some really, really beautiful places, and I'm hoping that wasn't while you were in New Zealand, mate. But you'll find that setting your ISO manually, you have control, and if you set to ISO 100, okay, you might have to use a tripod and it might take 25 seconds, 30 seconds to take the photograph. But you're going to get a solid, clear, crisp image. Whereas astrophotography, those of you who aren't au fait with astrophotography, basically you would take a series of 50, 60 images, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, and then you kind of meld them together. So you're taking 50, 60 images of 20, 30 seconds a piece. 30 seconds at ISO 12,800. Noisy as you like, and you meld those together, one on top of the other, top of the other, top of the other in Photoshop or whichever software you happen to use. It's going to look horrible. It's going to end up looking like a mosaic. So, master ISO. So I've started with ISO. When I teach my face-to-face courses, I generally go through camera functions. This is what a camera does. This is a lens. This is a camera body. Here is the house. Here is the window for Police Academy fans. But I then go to ISO. Can you upload the PDF to Facebook? Well done. Yeah, absolutely, Ben. Absolutely. Photography lecturers asking me for my work. No problem, Ben. Thank you. So, yeah, by using your ISO and keeping it low, you maintain the fact that you maintain a beautiful quality image. Yeah. So play with it. The best thing to do is to try these with your cameras. I can tell you this, that, and the other. I've got a 2.5 grand camera body that I use. Yeah. And it's a bigger sensor than the majority of yours. It's what we call a full frame sensor, so the sensor's the same size as the frame of film, whereas your sensor, so mine is 24mm by 36mm by 24. So with your majority of sensors on your cameras, those of you that have the crop frame or the APS-C size sensors, so the EOS 100s, the EOS 250s, Nikon 3500s, etc., etc. Your sensors are smaller, they're about 24 by 18mm. So you're already enlarging your image straight off. So I've got a better quality camera straight away. But when we go ahead and this is actually more of a reason, if you're not using the full frame 2 grand camera body, this is more reason to be really conscious of your ISO, because it's going to help you get better image quality. It really, really is. And when you start looking at this and playing with it, you're going, oh yeah, it's what I call the Alan Partridge moment. It's the aha when that penny drops. So yeah, have a play and kind of go from there. Next Saturday, I'm going to do an aperture course, purely aperture. I'm going to have a camera out. We're going to be looking at images I'll take. I've done this earlier in the week, and it was a bit of a train wreck. You couldn't see the images on the screen. I'm now using a lovely piece of software called Ecamm Live. And it means I can have my lovely 5D Mark IV in front of me, and I can have my laptop that I can use as well, and then I can show you my screen, which Facebook, great. So I'm going to be able to give you a lot more content and be able to hopefully make a lot more sense. Me making sense. Anyway, before we head off, are there any questions relating to ISO or just cameras in general? Is there anything about your camera you're going, oh, why is it doing that? What's going on here? Anything, oh, well, why should this do this? You're all going to have a play with auto ISO, with setting your ISOs manually, yeah? Cool. If there are no further questions, I'm going to leave you to it. 40 minutes, not bad, not bad, not bad. You're very welcome, Fran. Very, very welcome, very welcome. So, yeah, I will put the PDFs up and I will find a way to share that press if that helps anybody. If you want it, drop me a message, but I will definitely find a way to share the PDFs. If you want the presentation generally, that's fine. And if you have any questions, you know how to get hold of me, guys. Drop me a DM. It's not like we're doing anything at the minute, is it? So, thank you for joining me this afternoon. Take care. I have a question about your setup, but for later. Okay, Adrian, that's fine. The setup, what I'm doing now, yeah, okay. 5D Mark IV on tripod, tethered to laptop. Yeah, but we can talk about that offline. Cool. Right. Thanks for the name drop, by the way. I uploaded PDFs when I'm doing scans. Oh dear. Right, guys, it's been great fun. Sorry, don't touch face. Have a play with the ISO. If you want to send, if you've got any questions, then drop me a DM. If you've got my email address, drop me an email. I'm more than happy to kind of field questions. Otherwise, 3 o'clock next Saturday, all being well. Lots of love. Take care. Stay safe. Please stay at home. I know it's a lovely weekend, but please, for the love of God, stay at home. The sooner we all kind of take notice of this, the sooner this whole lockdown situation will be over, and we can all go out and start taking pictures and catch up, and who knows, maybe have like a meet-up photo session. So, yeah, all the best. Lots of love. Take care. I will see you soon. Ciao for now. And now I need to work out how to finish this thing. Oh, I do love technology. I do love technology. Oh, finished. That'll do. Bye-bye.